to this week's edition of the Wellbeing Show. And I'm pretty excited about it this evening, to be honest, because we're highlighting the work of a charity called Christmas For CAMHS. Hope I got that right. I'm going to explain to you what CAMHS is, or they're going to explain to you what CAMHS means in a minute. It's essentially working with kids and making sure kids who are in hospital care, but a particular sort of hospital care, get a Christmas experience. And as we're coming up to Christmas, and as CAMHS deals with mental health, it's a perfect fit for this show to really discuss that. We've got some three amazing professionals on this evening who, some of whom have just met each other 5 minutes ago, and I think they're doing amazingly well, not to run away terrified and screaming of the whole experience. We're going to hear all about it. If you listen to this on the 14th of December at sort of around about 9 o'clock UK time, then it's live. And so it'd be really cool if you wanted to join in. You can drop some questions in on one of the platforms we're streaming on, so Facebook Live and YouTube, and James will try and scoop those questions up and send them through to me. Or you can send me a WhatsApp on the old phony thing. You go, oh, look at that, a blue screen effect, how strange. And the number's +44 7506 319 745. So it'd be lovely to hear from you folks. Without further ado, I'm just going to do a sort of round robin sort of introduction of people. So I'm going to go clockwise, my right, that way. So Lauren, you're first on the clock face. Who are you? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Lauren. So my background currently is I work for a different mental health charity as a youth worker, a senior youth wellbeing officer, is my current title. So I work with about 100 young people with lived experience of mental ill health at the other charity. So, but yeah, I'm also a trustee for Christmas For CAMHS. So that's the main reason I'm here today. Great,
fantastic. Alicia, did I say it? No, Alicia?
Alicia, that's it. Yeah.
Alicia, there you go.
So I'm Alicia. I'm an occupational therapist. In my current role, I'm a deputy ward manager, and I work in an adolescent mental health ward in Cornwall called Sowena. We look after children and young people between the ages of sort of 13 and 17 that have got some quite complex and enduring mental health problems to the point where they need to be in hospital. So that's some very poorly young people. Yeah.
Ro.
Hi, I'm Rosanna, or Ro. I am a doctor by background. I've worked in paediatrics and in mental health. Though currently I work in improving mental health services, and I teach in a medical school. And I, along with Lauren, I'm one of the trustees of Christmas For CAMHS.
Okay, great. So there's a few words that are sort of long words that are confusing me at the moment. So I'm going to ask somebody to explain them. First of all, I guess, do people know what paediatrics mean? Let's explain that. What does paediatrics mean? Sometimes that's been confused, and I've heard them used for very unfortunate things, but sort of tell me about paediatrics.
It means healthcare for children, anyone usually under 16, sometimes 18, depending where you are. So from babies right up to teenagers. And generally speaking, paediatrics focuses on physical health. So if you've got a chest infection and you need to be in hospital, you'll see a paediatrician. Whereas
for most people, it's the famous hospitals like Great Ormond Street and stuff like that that deal with kids. That's the sort of image that comes to my mind. Is that right?
Yeah, though pretty much every local hospital will have some form of children's ward, or at the very least we'll see children in their A&E emergency department, which will very often have paediatricians working there, and paediatricians on a children's ward, even in quite a small hospital. So most hospitals will have paediatricians.
And sort of like physical health, as opposed to mental health, children's wards, I think, try as hard as possible to make them as homely as possible, with parents being there and stuff like that. Is that right?
Yes, most children's wards in general hospitals will have beds for parents to stay overnight. Not always possible. So sometimes, say, a children's intensive care unit. The parents can't stay with their children, but they can be there for as much of the time as possible.
Yeah, which is one of the big differences, I guess, between a sort of a physical health ward and a mental health ward, because I've never heard of a mental health ward having parents stay over and stuff like that. So that would be very unusual, wouldn't it? So there's a big difference in terms of how the care looks. And there's I don't know if you know this, and you can shoot me down in flames if I'm wrong, but there was a psychotherapist called D.W. Winnicott way back in the 50s. One of those people used to work in the East End, which is not far from me, actually. There's the Winnicott Centre is there by the old Hackney Hospital on Mile End. And
yes, I've worked there.
Yeah, you know the area. Do you know the Winnicott Centre? Yeah,
I have worked there.
Yeah, it's a sort of great service, and he used to have these. He wrote a load of books, and I think a lot of his stuff is pretty out of date. But some of the interesting things he talked about was around hospital care for children, and he was, I think, one of the early advocates of having parents stay in hospitals, and that being helpful to children to stop them being anxious and abandoned, because up until that point it was assumed that parents had to be skedaddled out, and the doctors and medics and all the experts could deal with the children, and the sort of emotional needs, the attachment needs of the kids were not thought about. And so I think I'm right in saying Winnicott was one of those advocates. Is that right, Ro? Do you remember that?
I didn't know that. But it would make sense in terms of what I do know about him.
Yeah, I mean, he used to have a Sunday night radio show where he'd talk about all these things. Very unusual. For a psychoanalyst, very unusual in sort of a lot of people. Psychoanalysts tended to see one or two people and then write volumes about it for the rest of their lives, sort of invent stuff based on no evidence. He was unusual, and he saw thousands of people because of where he worked, and very interesting in that way. And one of my heroes, as you can probably tell from my early training, mainly because of that, because he worked in the East End and he saw lots of people, and he came up with the idea of you just have to be good enough as a parent, which I think is one of the most remarkable statements that anybody could ever make about parenting, and really, really good stuff. But that sort of approach is not okay in this world called CAMHS. Now, so somebody want to tell me what CAMHS is? I mean, it's sort of the spaghetti junction of mental health care and healthcare in general is going to be happening a lot this evening, I feel. Yeah. So what is CAMHS? Somebody tell me about that.
We sure love an acronym in the NHS, that's for sure. I mean, the NHS itself is an acronym, so it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Yeah. So CAMHS stands for Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. And that is all of it's a big umbrella term that kind of encapsulates all of the care for any adolescents that are receiving any mental health support. So I work on the inpatient side of things. So I work on a hospital ward that looks after children that need hospitalization as a result of their mental health difficulties, but it also encapsulates all sorts of different care in the community. So we have certainly in the NHS a vast amount of community CAMHS services, and they work with young people in clinics in the community that need a level of support, but not to the level of hospitalization. And it's made up of a huge array of different individuals and professions. So I'm an occupational therapist, Ro is a doctor, and as well as as that, there's a vast amount of clinicians involved in CAMHS. So a huge nursing workforce, certainly on the ward and in the community. We have lots and lots of nurses, different therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists, as you all know very well, Noel, I'm sure. And CAMHS is just a big umbrella for all of those different services that are looking after the mental health needs of our adolescents in our society.
So, Lauren, I saw you nodding away when we were talking about the word community, because I guess as a youth worker that would be your sort of natural space to be operating in. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it's a mix. So the young people I work with, access community mental health services and also inpatients, so a mix. but yeah, I mean, they both have their places, I think. But yeah, most of the young people that I tend to work with in my other role sit within both of those services, and also adults as well.
Tell me something about that. I'm intrigued. People may, I suppose, erroneously make the assumption that, if you're getting to mental health services, whip you off to hospital and lock you up and take away your freedoms and stuff like that. But I'm guessing that's not, well, I know that that's not the case. That my understanding is that the vast majority of mental health services tend to be in the community and look at prevention of crisis and trying to make sure that kids don't end up on a ward, not because wards are necessarily nasty or bad, but it's not the model of care we have really around mental health. Is that right? People are nodding away. Do you want to say something about that, Lauren, your experience of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think where possible, ideally, you would keep children and young people in their communities. So with their parents or their carers, around their friends, around their siblings, around people that are in their life, where possible, as much as possible, like that would be what you want. But sometimes that's not always the reality of young people's experiences, unfortunately.
I'm going to labour the point because I think it's really interesting for people to hear about it. So, Ro, you were nodding away there around the idea of community-based services and prevention of sort of hospitalisation. Can you say why we might want to avoid, not that hospitals are bad places, because they have their place, right? They always do. But in terms of mental health, sort of why might we want to avoid hospitalisation? Why do we want to maintain connections in communities and homes, etc.?
Lots of different reasons.
Okay.
Connections with, like Lauren said, families, also connections with school. School is really important for most children and young people, and can be a big part of normality, even for children who don't enjoy school. Or aren't having a great time. It's still part of routine and part of normal life for them. And so going into hospital, and whilst most CAMHS units, most hospitals for children and young people with mental health difficulties do have some form of school attached to them, it's not the school that the young person usually goes to.
Yeah.
So that's a big change, but also on a practical...
There isn't a ward next to every single school in the world, is there? That's
yeah, exactly.
You have a certain number of wards that have a certain number of beds, and if you're going to use a bed, you have to go to the ward that's closest to you, but that's not necessarily on your doorstep. Yeah.
But also on a practical level, there are really very few CAMHS hospitals in the UK, and they're quite geographically spread out, and so for a lot of children and young people, if they were to be going into hospital, that hospital would be very far away from home. And often there isn't a space in their local hospital, so they could be sent even further away from home, which is a huge disruption for them, and also, for family coming to visit them, that kind of thing. It's, if you can stay at home, that's usually preferable. Yeah,
I mean, the sort of background I come from, like my early career was moving people out of hospitals into, because I'm that old, so it's like I did a lot of hospital closures within the mental health and disability sector, moving people back into their homes, because the evidence was that having local connections and, for want of a better word, normal relationships, whatever that might mean. Like there's a lot of my friends are not very normal, but they are my friends, and they help me stay well and grounded and connected, and they're important to me. So I guess it's quite difficult to imagine for people what it's like if you become vulnerable and ill, and you have, you'd have to be quite ill to be admitted to a psychiatric ward. Yes, is that right?
Yeah.
It's not done on a whim, I'm imagining.
No, certainly not. So yeah, as I sort of said earlier, and as I guess Ro and Lauren have both alluded to, the majority of mental health care is delivered in the community, and that is absolutely the best place for it to be delivered. which I guess is an odd thing for me to say as somebody who works in a hospital, but you know, we all know that that is the case. We do, but the need for us to be there is there nevertheless, and we are there for the young people who are at risk of significant harm, either to themselves or others. And if that can't be managed in the community, you know, in that young person's home, and by the community team that are looking after them, that is what results in an admission to hospital. And I find it really interesting, because I think, you know, we use the Mental Health Act as a means of supporting that transition and helping with that decision making. I guess for a layperson that would be sectioning, but which means detention under the Mental Health Act. But that's not the only route to come into hospital. I think something what I found really interesting about embarking on this career in mental health is that actually some people choose, you know, if they're really poorly and they don't want to be sectioned, they can make that decision to come into hospital too, which I think is really important. So it's not that that view that people are in white coats come and, you know, lock them in a van and take them to hospital. That's not how it works. Obviously sometimes it's against people's will and we use the Mental Health Act, but a lot of the time people are able to choose, which I think is really important. And I think that is probably not the perception that a lot of the general public would have, I should imagine.
My feeling is, and my sense is, that as health professionals, you prefer the idea that somebody would choose a service, whether it be in hospital or community, and that you're going to get better outcomes in that way. If somebody wants it and thinks it can have a positive impact on their life. I can't imagine you're like, I'm trying to remember that character that blew a whistle and stole all the children from that German town. What was his name? You're not going around scooping up children and sort of trying to make a buck out of them and getting them working on a chain gang somewhere. But at the same time, I guess when children come into your care, you want them to feel cared for.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's it's a really interesting point about, you know, young people wanting to feel cared for. And
Pied Piper, that was who I was thinking of. Sorry.
yes. You know, I was thinking the child catcher actually, but that's equally as as odd. I think the thing about, you know, young people wanting to be feeling that they're cared for is really tricky, because I think when we do have young people admitted against their will, it's hard often for people to feel like they are being cared for, because when they're, you know, hoiked out of their day-to-day life, they're not going to their normal school, they're not living at home with their parents potentially, if that's what they were doing before, it can feel really uncaring. So it's quite counterintuitive to actually hoik someone up and put them in a hospital, but nevertheless that sometimes is necessary, and we have to work incredibly hard to help those young people to feel safe and contained and cared for in that context, because it's not, I guess, by its very nature, a very caring process to be involved in getting admitted to hospital.
Well, there may be emergencies involved if somebody's life's at risk.
Of course.
Decisions to save their life. But I guess what you're saying to me, Alicia, got it right that time.
You did, well done.
And is that there is a spectrum of experiences of entry into hospital. It's not necessarily it's not just one story. There's quite a different range of experiences, but the reality is that the kids who are going into hospitals are quite ill, and that's you know, fundamentally the issue that's going on, and ill enough so that it can't be helped safely and effectively within a community setting, right?
Yeah, certainly. And I guess, to be really frank about it, the majority of our young people are suicidal. They might have tried to end their lives, sometimes multiple times, and I think that's really hard to hear sometimes. But if not for that purpose, they might be at risk in another way. They might be at risk of self-neglect, maybe if they're acutely psychotic, for example, and at risk of harm through that means. But certainly the threshold of being admitted to hospital is quite high, and as you say, the young people have to be very poorly in order to get through our front doors.
So who's going to tell me, either Ro or Lauren, about the Mental Health Act, because it's been mentioned? What on earth is that thing, and sort of how does it feature in sort of mental health care?
Is that the Mental Health Act, did you say?
Yeah.
I can I can talk about it, I guess, very much with the caveat that as a psychiatrist, I can make use of the Mental Health Act to require someone to be in hospital if that is in their best interests, if the risk of an alternative is too high for it to be worth taking. But like you said, it's not something that we go around doing willy-nilly. You know, I don't want anyone to be in hospital who doesn't need to be, certainly not if that's against their will. But the Mental Health Act saves lives, ultimately.
So I'm really intrigued by the way you're talking about, because your values coming across in terms of how you're talking about, because I guess a lot of people would imagine that the idea of the Mental Health Act and sectioning is the norm, and it's easy, and doctors and nurses, they want to do this to you and they want to deprive you of liberty, and that might be the views and even the fears of some young people, to be honest, that is going to be a system which will deprive me of something, and that's not at all the impression I'm getting from any of you, but you in particular, Joe. You're sort of you seem even a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of it, full stop.
Well, it is uncomfortable. Yeah, it is uncomfortable to deprive people of their liberty and deprive them of access to the things that they like to access. It is uncomfortable, but it is also the reality of mental health care, that some people do need to be in hospital, and some people are not well enough to make that decision for themselves, or don't understand the need for them to be in hospital, or don't recognise that they're not well. So sometimes we have to make that decision for them.
Yeah, I mean, when it's not really the place to have this conversation, I guess, or really go into it. I mean, I'm one of those people that I'm more into the competency stuff rather than the mental health. I think the Mental Health Act is a bit out of date, really.
Yeah.
Northern Ireland, I think, has pointed to a new way of doing things, and I wish Stormont would sit down and just enact that legislation so we could see it in practice. For God's sake, would you get yourselves together? But and you know, my feeling is we missed an opportunity just before the pandemic to change the Mental Health Act in England, because it was up for review.
It is being changed, and there are changes, more changes coming. Some changes that have already come in.
Yeah, because it's a little bit of a blunt instrument, even when it's used sensitively. And there are various. I mean, it is. I mean, for people who don't know, there's a whole bunch of incredibly complex legalistic stuff that goes on, and you know, rules around you can use that door but not that one, and this bit of the act does that, and all this sort of stuff, and it's all a bit of a mishmash. But actually, it's good to hear that. I'll have to catch up with about the changes that are coming in, because but it's really interesting to watch you be uncomfortable about it, Joe, because I guess people just because I guess people just don't understand that these decisions that are made by health professionals are agonizing. They're really difficult decisions to make. It's not just signing something off really quickly, ticking a box. There's a heart-rending process by a human being, a series of human beings. It's not just one person. There isn't a god that decides. There's a whole team of people that really try and avoid a crisis if possible, and certainly my experience is try and avoid removing freedoms and rights from people completely, you know, because it's counterproductive. So Lauren, have you got any thoughts around that subject? And
yeah, I have my own personal thoughts on it all, and this isn't the place to go into them because I'm here as a representative, obviously, of like a Christmas for CAMHS. But I think that like it's reflective of where we are as a society now. So if we were in a different place of society where we had more community, particularly within Western society, we were better at supporting our neighbours and our local community, and we leaned in more to our community, I don't think we would need the kind of the way that the mental health system is set up right now. I don't think that we need it as much as we do rely on it right now. I think part of it is the way that like Western society is currently set up, that we don't kind of yeah, we don't look out for the person that lives next door, or for our cousin, or yeah, the elderly man we see walk past the door, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree. I mean, I can say these things because I don't have to worry about it. It's fine. I'll say them for you if you like. Just send them in the chat message what the messages are that you want to get across, and I'll say them for you. But I agree. And look, we're not here to bash anybody or have a go or even really make any political points. But I do come from the perspective, and I work within the context of sort of how we think about illness and health are really important. And that currently we do have, particularly in mental health, I think we still have quite old-fashioned views on these things, really quite out-of-date stuff going on. Not the practitioners, I have to say, but just the way services are set up. And I would be an advocate of sort of increased investment in, you know, for example, crisis intervention services, which would reduce the need for hospitals, and preventative work, proper preventative work, which is beginning to happen in schools, but you know, proper investment in that stuff, which would catch some of the more serious mental health issues like the eating disorders sooner, provide services so that you don't have wards full of young women trying to starve themselves to death, etc., etc., etc. And you know, we can do that. And there's also, I think there are broader political issues there about the way we allow social media to destroy body images and undermine young women, etc., etc. And I think there are some significant issues that need to be dealt with there, which are the broader socio-political things. And
yeah, I think like obviously mental health is a social justice issue, right? So like it's not,
of course it is.
Everything intersects with mental health, and you can't pull one thing from another. And I think that is part of the issue, is that we often don't talk about the intersections with mental ill health.
Yeah, I agree. And it's maybe, you know, I mean, I would love to go off on this tangent because it's actually where I'm most comfortable and most happy, to be honest. But we're here to try and talk about the charity and the sort of genesis. So the charity is Christmas in CAMHS, which is the idea of bringing Christmas into wards, I guess, more than anything else. Is that right?
Yeah.
So rather than sort of going towards the community conversation, we're talking about how can the community and that experience of Christmas come into the ward. And I've already mentioned that there is quite a distinction between mental health care within hospitals and mainstream healthcare for children in hospitals. Already there is a difference, because it would be, I don't know of any ward, CAMHS ward, that would have parents staying over and things like that. I don't know if we've reached that point, or it would even be thought about.
You
So
say
why
that,
is there that difference, do you think,
I
already?
think it's changing. I think
Is it?
Perhaps not staying over in the same sense as you would in a paediatric ward, but certainly where I work and lots of other adolescent mental health wards in the country have facilities for parents to stay over. But I guess the difference is in the reason those facilities are there. So I would assume, and Ro would have to give you more information about that because I'm certainly no expert in paediatrics, but I would assume that the majority of children being cared for in paediatric wards are very physically unwell. They might be in pain, and I guess in my mind, and this might be a stereotype, perhaps younger children and therefore having parents nearby is really important, because that's completely normal for their sort of developmental stage, I would imagine. But the young people we look after, you know, in that older age bracket, they lots of them have got challenging relationships with families. I think mental health difficulties and those kind of complex systemic factors go hand in hand, you know, with things like generational mental health difficulties, generational abuse and things like that. They go hand in hand with young people with complex mental health difficulties. So the relationships aren't always as harmonious as they may be in the typical population. That being said, you know, it's very important for young people to maintain those connections with their families and to have the support to be able to build those connections. And sometimes that's in the form of therapy, and sometimes it's in the just enabling them to be together through visits and having leave, etc. But we have accommodation on site. We've got a flat basically in the ward that parents can access. So it's not on the ward, it's just off the ward, but it means parents can stay. And I think it taps into what Ro was talking about earlier, about often young people that are in a position where they're hospitalised because of their mental health get sent potentially to the other end of the country. That's happening less now, but it does still happen, particularly if they need a more intensive treatment or a specialist treatment. But if a young person is a really long way away from home, visits are really tricky. It's really hard for families to get there. So us and lots of other wards in the country now are moving towards having facilities where parents can stay to help maintain those connections, because it is tricky, but it's not sleeping in a chair next to a bed as it might be in a paediatric ward. It's quite different to that, but it is
that
changing. Your
experience as well, Ray? You were nodding away there, that there's changes in that direction. Would you say they're desirable, or are the issues around the more systemic issues, that there may be fractures in the relationships anyway, and sometimes maybe actually the separation of families might be helpful?
I think it really depends from one young person to another. There will certainly be young people for whom that period of separation can actually be quite a positive experience, right. For a whole range of different reasons, and different things that have led to those relationships being more tricky. You also got to bear in mind that children who are looked after, so children who are perhaps in foster care or in residential care, are often more likely to experience mental health problems as a result of many different things, but potentially trauma or family difficulties. So they may be more likely to be hospitalised in a CAMHS unit, and so they may well not have family members who could be staying with them.
Right. And so I guess coming back to my question, there seems to be quite a lot of reasons why these tracks have been very different. Some of them because there are clinical needs that require separation, some because of some of the issues around resources and distances and so on. And so there's complex reasons as to why they're slightly different and maybe have sort of different outcomes and different aims and different ethoses. So I wasn't suggesting there's anything bad going on. I'm just interested as to how this thing has come about. So there is a sense I'm getting as well, though, because of these complex reasons why the family aren't automatically involved, if you like, because of distance or clinical decisions that it might give kids a break from problems at home, etc. That gives me a sense that these wards maybe need the charities' work more, in a sense, because you haven't necessarily and automatically got the families coming in who would do quite a lot of that, bringing the presents in and bringing in that sort of Christmas cheer, etc., etc. And so there's almost, I'm getting almost a sense like these wards can feel a bit isolated in one sense. Is that correct?
I think so. And I was reflecting on it earlier, actually, about there's multiple reasons why young people in hospital might find Christmas especially difficult. One of them being, as you've already sort of talked about, is the physically being removed from parents potentially and being on a ward and not being able to go home for Christmas, which I must say is very rare. Most of our young people are able to go home for Christmas, because there's such a social pressure around Christmas, about being around families and being together and being part of your community and celebrating. That's really difficult for young people that want to do that. It's also really difficult for the young people who are disconnected from their families, or as Ro alluded to, maybe in the care system, and they may not experience a family Christmas in that very stereotypical sense. It's difficult for them. And also, I think nationally, I think it's fair to say we're seeing an influx of young people with eating disorders. And young people that are in hospital with eating disorders, Christmas is a really difficult time because there's such a pressure and around food. There's such a prominence around food everything is food related at Christmas, isn't it? And I think, you know, all the adverts on TV are talking about Christmas puddings and all of these different things. And I think that those three factors in particular make things really difficult for young people at Christmas. And it's bleak, isn't it? It's quite bleak thinking about being in hospital for Christmas. Most of our young people don't want to be, they want to be at home. And I think what strikes me so much about the charity, and what I love hearing about, is actually what Rowan, Lauren and the rest of the team have recognised, is that actually there seems to be a huge kind of discrepancy between what a paediatric ward or a hospice, for example, might receive in terms of the support from the general public. Because, you know, people say Christmas is about giving, don't they? And the paediatric wards and the hospices, etc., and these other places that look after children of the same age can be, you know, flooded with gifts. And it's not the same for children in inpatient mental health. It's just not. I think I sometimes wonder whether it just feels a bit icky. You know, there's something about paediatric wards that are a bit more palatable, perhaps. I'm not sure. There's something quite tricky, I think, to think about young people being in hospital for mental health reasons. But yeah, for sure, it can be a really isolating time for the young people we look after, and across the country, you know, in a similar situation. It's really, really tough for them at Christmas.
It's almost, I'm getting the sense, it's almost like these wards are sort of invisible, really, and just not on people's radars, as it were.
Exactly.
Whereas, you know, you've got Pudsey, and we all know what Pudsey is about.
Exactly.
Et cetera, right? But Pudsey, I don't remember Pudsey being connected to a kid with an eating disorder necessarily on a ward over Christmas. I hadn't seen that image. I haven't watched Children in Need in a while, but I haven't I'm sure they do touch upon it. But it isn't and also I guess, and this isn't comfortable to say, but it's the truth, that often mental health problems present in ways that are uncomfortable and difficult to manage, and they're not cuddly. They're not cuddly teddy bears at all. And you've alluded to some of the issues and it can be, and often is, quite antisocial, actually, the way mental health problems present, and difficult to manage, and etc. So there is that. Lauren, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that people just don't even really, it doesn't come into people's peripherals. They don't even realise that it's a thing, it's an issue. Right. So I didn't even realise until Ro kind of did a big shout out 7 years ago that she'd noticed this big difference between medical and mental health wards. I didn't even really register that might be a possibility. So I think part of the issue is that people don't realise that mental health wards aren't getting the kind of same Christmas treatment. But that doesn't mean that the community haven't really stepped up when we've kind of opened people's eyes to it, because they really have over the years. The amount of money and donations and cards this year, especially, that people have donated, shows that people genuinely do care about those children, young people. They just didn't realise that this was an issue, I think.
That's a really hard message,
Lauren. When I first sort of really noticed that disparity between paediatric wards and CAMHS units over Christmas, I was really racking my brains as to, well, why is this? Is it just that people don't know that CAMHS units exist, that children and young people have serious enough mental health problems to need to be in hospital? Or is it something to do with stigma? Is it that, you know, a poorly child, you know, we've all seen the adverts and the fundraising for children's hospitals and children's charities. You know, a poorly child in a hospital ward is cute and, you know, really pulls on the heartstrings, whereas a teenager with, let's say, self-harm wounds, or who looks very unwell from anorexia, that doesn't appeal to people's heartstrings in quite the same way. Plus, you know, the stigma that exists in society. So I think there's so many different reasons. Plus, you know, like we said, there's not that many CAMHS hospitals. So that's a big part of why people don't know that they exist. You've got a children's ward in pretty much every local hospital. You really don't have that many CAMHS units at all. So there's, so many different things driving that discrepancy.
which is pointing to why it's really important to have charities like yours that actually can understand all of these issues and sort of really target and make sure that those kids do get some sense that somebody cares, not just the professionals. I mean, there's, I think, and I'm a big softie, but I'm all for sort of heart gifts, as I call them, and people sort of making those gestures. My name is Noel. How could I not like Christmas, for God's sake? I mean, every year I get those Christmas cards saying, "Oh, you've never had a card with your name on it, have you?" Yes, I have. That's for 5 years. You know, so how could I not like this time of year? I'd be crazy. But I am a great believer in, and this is also my practice as a therapist, I'm a great believer in you know, oxytocin-based relationships, attachment-based relationships, love-based relationships very much inform sort of what I'm about as a human being, but also what I think healthcare needs to be about. And getting those gestures from the public actually can be, in my experience, hugely helpful to people who are struggling with mental health problems, for all the reasons that we've just described why isolation occurs. If we then reduce it down to the individual child, that's going on inside them. That's what they're experiencing, all those things. And I'm just trying to imagine how difficult it is being a child, trying to navigate through all those pressures. You know, it's like impossible. It's impossible, isn't it, to contain that as a human being. Even as an adult, I've been doing this 26 years and I still find it difficult and overwhelming to sort of try and contain all that stuff. Being a kid trying to do that, for goodness sake, you know. And I think those heartfelt gestures, like some total stranger has put in their money in their pocket, taken it out and bought a present and I got it, actually in my experience can be life-changing. I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but because I worked a lot in a charity called Kids Company that wound up because the boss was in bonkers. She was totally, but the work was fantastic, I have to say. And you know, it was that heartfelt gestures would turn a child's life around.
Yeah,
suddenly
absolutely.
they felt esteemed and valued.
Absolutely.
Like
I mean, we
mattered,
don't
they
have,
existed, you know.
we don't have direct contact with the children and young people that we send gifts to. We mostly hear about things from people like Alicia, who work on the CAMHS units. But every now and then we get a message or an email from someone who previously was in a CAMHS unit, and they send us a message or an email saying, I was in hospital over Christmas a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, and I've just realized that you're the organization that sent me a present, and it made me feel so much less alone. And it's not like we give big things, you know, we give coloring books and fidget toys and fluffy socks and, you know, things that can just make people feel a little bit better. We're not going to fix anyone's mental health problems with a coloring book.
Things, Ro, they're called feelings.
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
I think feelings are really big things.
Exactly.
Particularly for kids who are struggling, because feelings are the problem, aren't they? And to have a kind, generous, loving feeling given to you when you don't have many of those to generate within yourself, that's awesome, I think. So it is big, right?
Yeah. But I mean, we're not giving Xboxes or anything like that.
No.
But it doesn't need to be to generate those feelings.
No, but it's interesting. I think, you know, thinking about, I mean, we've Alicia, you've nicely problematized Christmas and the fact that it has been hijacked by big business and is destroying people, I think, because of that reason. But actually, that's not what Christmas is, and that's not what these midwinter celebrations are. These midwinter celebrations across the board are about bounty, celebrating life in the face of midwinter death. That's why they always existed. And they would always generally be historically communal events where you'd all gather in somebody's house. They would be called the Lord or whoever they would be called. But everybody was bringing a pot and bringing something in, and that's where it all comes from, these celebrations in the middle of winter to say we're going to get through this, you know. And so the symbolic significance is really important. And you think about the Christian myth of Christmas, the birth of this child that represents rebirth, hope, life. They're all about that, every single midwinter thing. And so this idea of, you know, getting back to this, particularly these acts of kindness for which we are not going to get a reward. Altruism is the word that it's called, but it's a genuinely altruistic thing, isn't it, that you're doing? And altruism can help us as the person who gives, but it's also well researched, phenomenally well researched, that altruism towards other people can have a magic light effect on them. You know, and I'd encourage people, you know, you can do simple acts of altruism, like if you have a nice bus driver, write a note to their boss and say, this person was really nice. And I can tell you, it turns out, particularly bus drivers, they have a shit job. I wouldn't do it, it's horrible. When they get a nice note, it can sort of make them feel fantastic for a year. So I think it is really important that we get across this sense that what you're doing, I think, is really in the spirit of Christmas. That you're not going to get any kudos for it. You don't get anything back. And you're not even meeting the kids that get it, but they get it, don't they? That total strangers have cared about them. And you facilitate those connections, going right back to the beginning of the show, those connections which one of the saddest things, I think it is one of the saddest things, is the disconnection that takes place for kids, in not just the physical disconnection of having to go far away to a hospital and etc., but the social, political, cultural disconnection. You know, all those intersections, Lauren, as you would talk about them, that happen to people because they, particularly children, and this process of reconnection seems really important to me, and it's metaphoric, symbolic significance around this idea of Christmas. Not as a necessarily Christian celebrate. I'm an atheist, I still celebrate it, but the idea of bounty and reconnecting seems really important. So tell me about sort of how it works as a charity, how people can help out, and then how you get these presents out, how sort of they're distributed, and how it's... Oh, I've got to go. That's tells you it's live. My people are coming home. Puddle. How you doing?
Oh.
We can carry on speaking.
Remy, you okay? You're going to go downstairs. I'm just finishing off some work.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm abroad, folks. So there you go. It's a live show.
Yeah.
Come. That's all right. So tell me about how it works practically in terms of what do people do? How do they donate? How do they get involved? And how do you share their stuff? And how do you get it out to the kids?
Shall I let you answer that, Lauren? And then Alicia can tell us the end part of it.
The other side. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I can do. So yeah, we've been running 7 years this year, which has really flown by. And yeah, back in 2015, 16, whatever year it was we started, we were just we just did a shout out generally, and I think we raised about £1,000. I managed to get to maybe 30 children at that point. And this time now, 7 years later, we're reaching, hopefully we think, every single child and young person that's spending Christmas time on a mental health ward. So essentially what happens is
you've gone from 30 children to every child,
hopefully. Sometimes random units.
Did I just hear that right?
Yeah. The first year it was a couple of hospitals. The second year 300,
astonishing,
400, and now over 1,500.
So you're getting presents and Christmas cheer to every kid that's inpatient over Christmas. That's extraordinary.
Unless there's a newly opened CAMHS unit somewhere in the UK that we don't know about, but we try very hard to find them all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So things have really...
I'm slightly astonished. I'm really... people don't know this, but you know, the NHS grinds slowly Really, sort of this is unheard of. This is absolute Marvel movie stuff. Absolutely extra. I'm really floored by that. That's really genuinely impressive, folks. That is wow. I'm just like, I don't know what to say about that. That's absolutely blown the top of my head off that you've done that. What an achievement. Okay, and sort of how did that happen? You know, that you went from.
Yeah, so obviously people have got to know us over the years, and the first maybe like 4-5 years we were running out of our living rooms. So in the build up to Christmas, like us 3 people generally, and a few volunteers that run it, kind of filled our living rooms with boxes and boxes and boxes of gifts, and packed them up ourselves and delivered them. We've got a bit more tight with how we work now logistically. So the way that we work now is we still fundraise throughout the year, but most of our funds tend to come in kind of around Christmas time. And then we use that money to buy Christmas presents, gifts, activities, decorations, that kind of thing. And then we have a packing weekend that happens in Bath. So this is the second year that we've done that. And the packing weekend is a big group of volunteers, usually local volunteers to Bath, come together and spend the weekend with us in different time slots and essentially pack up all of those many boxes to go around to those many hospitals up and down the country. So logistically, that's how we work, but we wouldn't be able to obviously buy any of those gifts or deliver those gifts without people's fundraising and people donating to us. So yeah, every year we're so grateful for the money that people do donate to us. And this year, for the first year as well, we did a big shout out to people to, because we realised because of the cost of living crisis and things, not everybody's going to be able to donate money or gifts. So this year we asked if people would hand make cards for us, and we were flooded with cards. So up and down the country, we had school children, we had nurseries, we had universities, we had care homes making handmade cards and then delivering to us in Bath. And then over the packing weekend, those went into the boxes as well. So this year, children and young people, hopefully every single child and young person on a ward and mental health ward this Christmas will get a gift and a handmade card as well.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Ro, tell me how, I mean, there's got to be some politics involved in schmoozing people and getting people on board to agree, or have all the wards just gone, yeah, fine, just send me loads of presents?
Basically, yes. I think in the early days, like before we had a very official looking website, and when we were just using a Gmail address, there were a few hospitals that were a bit sort of, are you real? Are you legit?
Yeah.
Is this okay? And we used
have you
to
got your police check, please?
Yeah, and we used to do a lot more hand delivering of gifts because it was a lot cheaper. So yeah, a couple of times I or one of our volunteers would turn up to a hospital and say, here's your big box of gifts, and people would sort of be a bit like, who are you and why are you giving us gifts? We're not used to this. I can imagine it. Because they're not used to it.
That would have been me at one point when I was inpatient. Well, I'd be like, what?
Yeah, exactly. But nowadays, people have got to know us, and so people like Alicia will know that come September, October, they'll get emails from us in their inbox saying, hello, it's coming up to Christmas soon. How many young people have you got and what would they like? And so we ask each hospital, what kind of things would your young people like? We ask them, are there specific things that they want? We also ask, are there, we've talked about children in care. We ask, are there any children who are in particular need of an extra gift? So we give some extra gifts. Last year we gave 26 extra gifts for children who aren't going to be getting any presents from anywhere else, really.
Right.
So yeah, the CAMHS staff tell us what sort of thing would suit their population in their hospital, and we ship it off to them, and then people like Alicia open the box.
Alicia, how does it work from your end? What's the impact on the ward?
Do you know what? I think it's my favorite day of the year, and I'm not just bigging them up because they're here. I love it when that box of gifts arrive. I absolutely love it. And we know it's coming. What's beautiful is that we know it's coming, and we know roughly what's going to be in there, and we know it's what the kids are going to want too. So it's not just one of these random acts of kindness where, you know, I certainly remember we've had gifts, you know, donated from the best possible place, from maybe local organisations that local to the hospital that wanted to do something, but without any consultation, they might not get it. And sometimes we get things that maybe are not okay, but everything that we receive from Christmas for CAMHS is absolutely spot on. And how it works for us, obviously, as Ro explained, we all get asked who we're going to have at Christmas, what they're going to want, plenty of time in advance, and then it turns up on our doorstep in early December. Not only is it the Christmas presents, we normally get decorations for the ward. So this year, I know for a fact we got lots of beautiful stickers for the windows. We've got stencils to be able to paint the windows. We've got paper chains. We've got all sorts of stuff. And I can tell you now, COVID's out the way and the infection control measures are not as stringent, because those Christmases were dire. Now we can go a bit more to town on the Christmas decorations, and we can utilize those, which is great.
And you can get the kids involved decorating.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well. Absolutely. They love it. And I think what we then do, we think together as a team. We get this big box of gifts and we think, right, who's having what? And we continue the Christmas elf work, and we wrap them up at the unit and we name them, and they go under our Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. And regardless of whether the young people are on the ward and get to open them on Christmas Day, or they might be on leave with their families, they still get a gift. And do you know what? I think the impact, it's not the gift itself necessarily, it's just the thought that young people are being thought about, and that people whom they've never met are sending them gifts to make them feel more joy at Christmas. And just, do you know what I mean? Just recognise that people are there caring about them and thinking about them, and that's really important. And as well as the gifts, I think the cards have reinforced that more than ever this year, all the lovely handmade cards. And the beautiful thing is that most of them just say dear friend, which is lovely, because they're not addressed to anyone in particular. Dear friend, we're thinking about you, we hope you have a lovely Christmas. And that's lovely.
Beautiful. What a success story. So I'm sitting with Santa. So Laura and Ro are actually Santa. That's extraordinary. I never thought I'd meet Santa, but there you go. I've just done it.
In all the years that we've
off the bucket list.
In all the years that we've been doing this, that's the first time that I've ever heard anything directly from anyone who's opened one of those boxes. We get some emails and we ask people to fill in a form, but this is the first time that I've heard someone say that, and it's wow.
I'm glad. Do you know,
you've not heard that, Ro? That's, oh my god.
No, I don't work in CAMHS anymore, and I don't sort of come across CAMHS staff, and we don't meet young people who've received our gifts. So there isn't a way that we hear these kinds of things other than by email sometimes. So yeah, thank you, Alicia.
Oh no, it's great to meet you guys. I think it's
to reiterate for people, they've not met before tonight.
No, we've had lots of email conversations and all sorts of things like that, but no, never met. And I think it's amazing to think the hard work that you guys and the rest of the team put in.
I've got to tell you something really sad. The hour's up. I told you this would happen. It's like they were out of time, unfortunately. I did warn you before the show that this is the way it goes. We'll just get caught up in a conversation, and then I'll have to be Grinch and stop it. Just before we finish, though, have you got a website, or have you got a way people who might be watching this can donate and contribute? Yeah, what is it? Absolutely.
Our website is Christmas For CAMHS, CAMHS.org.uk. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website will link people to our Just Giving page, or people can donate by text message now. So if you text Christmas gift to 70470, it sends us £5, which
Great.
is enough for at least one gift, because we buy them in bulk and we get the best deals we can. So they usually
Brilliant.
cost no more than £5 per child.
And James will have posted all of those details. We are going to have to finish. I just want to apologise to everybody, just to sort of let you know, the reason we were interrupted is because I came over to France to see my boy, because there's no way I wouldn't spend some time with him for Christmas. And that's what it's about, isn't it? So he's in bed at the moment and we're on his mum's boyfriend's yacht.
Wow.
It just came in, so that's what's going on here. We'll try and edit out that bit where I get up and sort of start to move towards my cabin, but I might leave it in just because it's evidence that this is live and this is real. But for me, I couldn't think of anywhere else I'd want to be rather than with my son at this time of year. That's the truth, you know. And I managed to avoid all the strikes and all the snow and get out of England and come over to France to see him. And no amount of effort, it doesn't matter. I'd put in any effort whatsoever, and that's the way it needs to be with kids. And sort of to meet you all as professionals, and you are professionals, you know exactly what you're doing, but you're going that extra mile to make sure kids feel loved, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the wrong word, but I think that's what it is.
Not at all.
I think that's what it is. And it's the saddest thing about kids in care and kids in the mental health system. What they really need is somebody to give them a bit of love on a regular basis. You know, that's what kids need. That's what we all need. It's really inspiring stuff that you're doing. And I'm close to tears, actually, I have to say. It's really beautiful stuff to sort of discover this. Particularly with all the news that's going on, and everybody's fed up about something, aren't they? So it's great to have an uncomplicated story of kindness and compassion, because that's, I think, what it's about. Gonna leave it there. You guys stay there while I say goodbye to everybody. We've got a Christmas break coming up, which is a relief to people who have to watch me every week. You don't have to see them until 2023 when we're back with more amazing people and wonderful stories. So I'm going to say goodbye for now and wish everybody a great Christmas and a good New Year. Catch up with you all in 2023. You guys stay here. Bye bye for now.